Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back for the first album of 2024, and I'd like to start this week with a little poetry. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I was a kid you never could trust. Quote, Eric Felsen, 1993, 5th grade signature book. I miss you, buddy. I hope all is well. Chris, we're going to do some Heavenly this week. Dust to dust. How are you, my friend?
I thought you were going to start quoting Metallica for a second there.
I could have gone in that direction, too. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I'm good. This was an interesting week because I spent it listening again to some of the stuff from 2023 that I needed to re-listen to, and this Heavenly album that I really have never sat down and listened to before, and it was kind of a beast.
Yeah, I have some strong thoughts. I love this album. When it came out, I chose it because it's the 20th anniversary. I said something incorrect on the last episode that it's the first French band that we've done. Apologies to Adagio. They were the first French band. This is the second. But here we are, going to go back in time. Before we do, though, a couple of things that came out, or one came out this week and one I kind of went back in the archives for. This week, the new Lord of the Lost covers album came out. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to this. The album is called Weapons of Mass Seduction, and it's basically 31 or 32 covers of some of the most interesting choices that you could possibly imagine. They go from David Bowie to Judas Priest to, I don't know, the Byrds, the Everly Brothers. I mean, this thing is all over the place, to say nothing of Lady Gaga. But I got to be honest, I really kind of enjoyed it. It was definitely a change of pace. But if you haven't checked it out and you like pop covers, Lord of the Lost does a nice job.
What Judas Priest song did they cover?
They would actually cover Turbo Lover, which leads us to our episode last week, where Sean the Metal Pigeon, well, I guess that was the first episode of 2024, requested Judas Priest's Turbo. So kind of fitting that Lord of the Lost was kind of on the same wavelength there.
Yeah, I really enjoyed some of these selections. And oddly enough, a bunch of them were songs that I heard for the first time covered by other metal bands. Small Town Boy by Bronski Beat, I heard for the first time by Delain. Him. Turbovox, was the original band?
I think so.
The first time I ever heard that song was Ed Guy on the Vainglory Opera album, which we've covered in the past. And It's a Sin by Pet Shop Boys, which first time I heard was Gamma Ray from their Power Plant album. So it's odd that some of these songs have been covered by metal bands in the past. But interesting, I Just Died in Your Arms by Cutting Crew, which is a classic 80s tune. But then Somewhere Only We Know by Keane, which is more of a early 2000s kind of emo rock tune. There's just a really nice selection of stuff on here. So yeah, I recommend this. I think Lord of the Lost does a good job with their versions of these songs, and it's a really cool. I mean, there's a lot of really good 80s stuff, but definitely, like you said, Bad Romance by Lady Gaga and some more modern tunes as well. So this is a really cool thing. It came out literally the last Friday of the year. I think just because it's a covers album, I'm not going to consider it for my top 50 list, which we'll discuss next week. But it's definitely worth checking out, or even if you just pick a couple of songs that you like and you just want to check out their versions of it. They just recently released a single for The Look, which it was covered by Tommy Johansson on his Swedish Hits Goes Metal. Him and Pelike do a very fun duet of that tune. So yeah, lots of good stuff. Glad you mentioned this because this is a fun album, and I think the band has got a lot of notice being in Eurovision along with Voyager, having two metal bands representing their individual countries. I think was a nice coup for the metal universe. So definitely a band to keep an eye on, and definitely check out this covers album. It's good stuff.
Yeah, well said, well said. And then I went back in the archives a little bit, not our archives, just back to an album from 2022 because there's some rumors that Avatarium is going to play 70,000 tons of metal. They haven't been announced yet, but somehow they wound up on the Spanish version of the site, but not the English version. So they may have leaked it by accident. They certainly have not been announced yet, and they took it down shortly after it kind of got out there that it had been up on the website. So I went back. I was a little, it had been a little while since I listened to them, and I listened to their last release, Death, Where Is Your Sting? And I got to be honest, they do doom really well. There's something melodic and almost poppy to their approach, despite the fact that they are obviously doing it in the doom style. I think it's just a really unique sound, and I hope they play the fest or the boat. I really do, because that is something I would definitely make time to check out.
That's a band that's definitely on my bucket list. Probably my favorite doom metal band, and of course, they have a female singer, and that's probably why they're my favorite doom metal band. I just find that her vocals are just so they're so awesome. Like they're just she has this kind of very soulful sound that really works, and so I've been a pretty big fan of them since there was a track not from their last album, but I believe it was the album before, or no, not even the one prior to that, Hurricanes and Halos. There was a song called "The Starless Sleep" that I was absolutely obsessed with. I just thought it was it had such hooks for a doom metal song. It was it was almost like, holy shit! I didn't know doom metal could be like this. So maybe I'd listen to it more often. So it almost it's I paid pretty. I listened to Death Wears Your Sting quite a bit in 2022, and I don't know if I liked it quite as much as the couple of previous albums, but they're definitely a band I always keep an eye on when new stuff comes out. I would presume that they're probably going to come out with a new album either later this year or sometime in 2025. But yeah, for your sake, I hope they do play 70,000 tons. I want to say they've played it before, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But would love to see them at Prog Power one of these years as well. Just a really cool band, and I think would translate well to a live setting.
Yeah, I think they would be a perfect fit in Atlanta. Hope I get to see them, and hope they continue to tour, because it seems like they're gaining popularity with each release. Although I will argue that some of their older stuff I did prefer to the last album, much like yourself. But yeah, did you have a chance to check out anything new this week, or did you go back in the archives for anything?
Mostly stuff just from 2023. I did post right before the end of the year my last playlist of 2023, which happened to be one of my Play the Old Shit, trademark Pat Gravino playlist. This was my Play the Old Shit Volume 6. And a lot of the songs really tend to come from us doing the podcast and songs that I either, never put on a playlist before that doing the episodes of the podcast kind of reminded me of, or songs I discovered through the podcast, such as, When Heaven Comes Down by Grim Reaper, or Evolution 169 by Nevermore, or The Hours That Remain by Mercenary. So those are just a couple of tunes you can find on there. Once again, all of our playlists are on Spotify, and we will be posting our end of 2023 playlists sometime before the end of the month for sure. So if you don't check out anything, at least check those out, because those will be chock full of our favorite tracks from our favorite albums of 2023. Yeah, nothing really on the new end of things. I've seen, there's been some singles that have come out that I really haven't had a chance to listen to by Leaves' Eyes and Green Day, of all of all bands.
Yeah.
So once we finish our year-end review episode, I will dive back into current stuff and try to make my annual resolve to actually keep up with things throughout the year, which I never actually never actually tend to do, but the effort, it's never for a lack of effort. So yeah,
The lack of
exactly. So yeah, lots of stuff to look forward to. I think I had mentioned to you off air that the first album of 2024 that I'm really looking forward to is Exit Eden. And their album comes out, I believe, when this drops on Monday, it'll be out the next Friday. But I really enjoyed their first non-cover track that they did with Marco, formerly of Nightwish, and then the tracks that they've released so far of the cover songs have been great. So looking forward to that, and I'm sure there's plenty more forthcoming. I know Isan has an album coming out this year. Leaves Eyes, as I'd mentioned. Lots of stuff to look forward to, and honestly, I'm really excited for this new Green Day album because I was so disappointed with their last release that they really kind of went into almost like a dance pop kind of direction, and it sounds like based on the singles I've heard so far, this is kind of going back in the mid 2000s kind of era, the 21st Century Breakdown, that kind of spot right there, maybe Revolution Radio, those two albums. So I'm hoping that this kind of is more of a return to form, and I also have a little something I want to mention about Pearl Jam, but I will save that for our news section towards the end of the episode.
I had something to say about them as well, so
it's probably the same thing,
but that's okay. Let's talk about some Heavenly. This band was kind of the second wave of power metal in many respects, in terms of their first album came out in 2000, and this album came out in 2004. So they were kind of after the Stradivariuses and the Halloweens for sure, but not the newer bands like, Powerwolf or anything like that. So it's kind of like, I call it the second wave of bands. And for a long time, this was my favorite Heavenly album. I thought the hooks were incredible. I think the songwriting is very interesting. But I'm going to kind of not waste time and kind of just say up front, I struggled with it more than I expected to this week. And I think that's in part to the fact that it was just much meatier than I remember. It is a long listen. And I think that although all the songs are pretty good, I think that if you kind of shaved about 15 or 20 minutes off of this thing, it might be a better album and just a more enjoyable listen. I'm curious, as someone who's never listened to Heavenly's Dust to Dust or this brand of French flower power metal, what do you think? Was this hitting your sweet spot? Because I did have it with you in mind, but I'm not sure you loved it like I thought you would.
Yeah, it wasn't like in Power Quest, never more 10 out of 10 kind of air, which is incredibly rare, but definitely my type of metal. This band reminds me of like the greatest hits of our high school days. It's like there's songs that make me think of mostly Gamma Ray, but there's Stradivarius, there's Angra, there's Halloween. Like it's like a power metal who's who that you can tell that they were influenced by, and based on, like you said, based on the timing of the releases, I'd put them kind of in that that category with the Dragon Forces and the Power Quests, like that kind of era, like you said, that second wave. It's a great way of putting it. I remember seeing either their first or second album at a used CD store in Scranton when I was in college, and I remember thinking like, wow, that's weird that they would have this here, but I didn't buy it. And maybe had I bought it, I would have gotten into this band a lot earlier than I did. But my recollection was about finding out about them was something about Gamma Ray, I think, helped them get onto the Noise Records label for their first album, and that's kind of how they got their start. I'm pretty sure Kai Hansen did like a guest spot on that first album and just kind of helped them kind of get their
Yep.
foot in the door. Do you happen to know any more about that? The kind of the band
Yeah, so
start?
they actually formed in 1993 in Paris, but I can't really give them credit for that because the first release didn't come out for another 7 years. But you hit the nail on the head. This band signed with Noise Records in 1999, and they released Coming from the Sky the next year, and it quite frankly was very well received. And soon thereafter, they would have a number of lineup changes, and I'm so happy that you mentioned all the different influences on these songs because I'm curious to see if we hear the same things. I definitely identified bands that were shining through each of these tracks, and I almost wonder if it was like partially a tribute to those that came before them. Like that's how much I heard the bands that you mentioned and then some. So I'm curious to see if we're the same there. I'm going to, for the sake of completion, I'm just going to kind of go through the lineup because, again, the band had just a lot of lineup changes over the years. Benjamin Soto on vocals, Maxence Pilo on drums, Frederick Leclerc on guitars, formerly of Dragon Force, currently with Creator. I mean, that guy is just an absolute monster, and there's nothing he can't play. Pierre-Emmanuel Pellisson on bass, and Charlie Cobio on guitars. So it's a 5-piece project. And I have to say, all in all, just a very dense listen. And it came out January 12th of 2004. And it was recorded in Heavenly Studios in France. So you can do the math there.
Yeah, I wonder if that's how they got that name. They chose not to stick with the original name of the band, Satan's Lawyer, which you might know a thing or two about.
That's not my band, but it might be my entire professional career, so I'll just leave it at that.
The first album, Coming from the Sky, was
what I will say
did feature Kai Hansen and.
What was that?
I'm sorry. I was just saying the first album did feature Kai Hansen and Pete Sielk. I never know how to pronounce this guy's name.
The guy from Iron Savior.
Yes. And he actually also helped produce it along with Thomas Knack, who was Gamma Ray's drummer at one point. So yeah, there is a bit of overlap with those Gamma Ray and Iron Savior kind of helping Heavenly get their foot in the door, as I had mentioned earlier. But yeah, you were talking about the lineup. Frederick Leclerc joined the band with the second album, Sign of the Winner, and then it would be I don't know. I don't know if the band has kind of like what's considered a classic lineup, or just, like you said, guys were just kind of coming in and out. But this was an interesting choice. I believe it's their is it their only concept
album?
I believe
it is. I'm not sure if Virus is a concept album. I don't believe Carpe Diem is, although I'd have to have somebody fact check me on that. What I can say is it's a very interesting listen because they kind of go away from the style of the first two albums in many regards. It's a little more, it's a little faster. It's a little heavier. I think that's definitely Frederick Leclerc's influence on some of the riffs on this album. I think it's obvious when you listen to it from the very beginning that this is something they spent a lot of time on. And I say that just because it had been 3 years since the prior release, and it really did sound quite different from Sign of the Winner.
Based on what I've heard from those first two albums, I definitely agree that this has a lot more of a grandiose kind of nature, an epic nature to it. Loudwire actually ranked it the 25th best power metal album of all time, which is, that's kind of a big deal, I would say.
There was a time where I think I would have absolutely agreed with that. I don't know that I have the same sentiment as I sit here today, as I've kind of moved away from the genre a little bit, but I certainly don't want to mince words. I enjoyed the listen. It was just a bit of a struggle the fifth and sixth time that I listened to it. I want to be clear about that. But
and it should be mentioned that Sasha Paeth produced this album. This was the first Heavenly album that he produced, and apparently was the only one that he produced, according to Wikipedia, so I'm sure the strong production values has a little bit at least to do with his presence. What did you think about the overall story arc that was told in the story? A little fantastical, if you will.
I think about our interview that we did when we were talking about He-Man. Just because of the way that this thing comes together, I don't have an affinity for lyrics like this. I think that, especially as I've gotten older, I don't really relate to them. But at the same time, I don't think I've ever listened to this album for the story. I just listened to it for the hooks because there are quite a few of them. And when you get deeper into some of these tracks, the album clocks in at, 70 plus minutes. I mean, this thing is, you get your money worth with this one. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, more than half the tracks are at least 6 minutes long, which for a power metal album is meaty. The story is straight out of Castlevania. Is it really?
I don't even think I realized that.
Yeah, so at least according to Wikipedia, the album is a concept album following a man seeking revenge upon the Master of Doom for transforming him into a vampire and forcing him to prey on the innocent for eternity. And the album concludes with the protagonist overcoming his master. He suffers a fatal wound, but he regains his soul and attains paradise.
There you have it.
I have to say, of all the concept albums I've heard, including No Spoon, this is a storyline that I'm not familiar with, at least in the metal world. So, interesting that it's a little bit more of like a fantasy-based kind of storyline, which you don't really see too much of. I don't think out like in this sort of way. Outside of like Rhapsody is that kind of reminds me more of I guess it's more of this kind of like noir vampire kind of thing. Like you don't really see a lot of that in metal. So I thought that was an. There was
a bit of criticism, I think, because of just vampires as a genre was kind of a big thing 20 years ago. So I think it was fitting, but at the same time, it did catch a little bit of slack in the press for it because they thought it was a little too cliche for what was happening in 2004. But I digress. This thing starts off with your typical standard power metal introductory track. It comes in at under 2 minutes. The song is called Ashes to Ashes. I immediately started thinking about a horror movie. There's like these sounds of screaming feral animals in the background. And then there's this cheesy voice actor that's like a poor man's Christopher Lee on this, leading into Evil, which is one of the most interesting power metal tunes, believe it or not, that I think I've ever heard. Any thoughts on Ashes to Ashes before we get into the first track proper?
No, it just sounds like another day at my house, like just howling and growling and drooling and that's just me. That's not even the dogs. Just, kind of like your run-of-the-mill, spooky intro. Not really much in the way of musically. It just kind of has like a, some like, spooky keyboard chords or whatever to lead things in. And then, man, that guitar riff that kicks in Evil has such a gamma ray kind of vibe to it. This song reminded me quite a bit of Gamma Ray, as a matter of fact. Like it feels like there were even some riffs that were pulled like right out of some older Gamma Ray songs. Certain songs remind me of specific Gamma Ray songs. Ironically, Gamma Ray has a song called Lust for Life. But getting back to Evil, the way that like it slows down, it kind of reminds me a bit of Man on a Mission from Land of the Free. Kind of like slows down to like a medium pace, even though the song starts out really fast. And I feel like that's something that Gamma Ray was really good at, and I feel like Heavenly kind of follows that pattern of songwriting, especially here. But I thought this was such a killer song to kick things off. Just has a lot of really excellent orchestration, great keyboards, strong guitar work. I love Benjamin Soto. His vocals are fantastic, not to be confused with Jeff Scott. Just a really great way to kick things off. I really like this song.
Arguably the best and most complete song on the album, I think. Honestly, it's one of the better power metal songs of the era. I've always thought that this track kicked ass. I love the bells at the beginning. I think it really kind of sets the mood. And it's very fast, it's upbeat, and very double bass drum heavy. They're coming out on fire with this one. And it's interesting. I didn't realize that Sato writes all the music. So you have it's not coming from the guitars or the bass or the drums, but it's really coming from a keyboard perspective in many ways. And while he's not the most powerful singer, he certainly fits the music very well. There's also a bit of a neoclassical feel in some of the spots on this song, but I will end it by just saying I think it holds up very, very well. And I love how the choruses seem to go higher and higher up the register, because by the end of this song, he's hitting notes that I just don't think are human.
Yeah, and I think what helps the kind of dispel the gamma ray comparison is that this is a singer very different from Kai Hansen. It's not, there is a little bit of I think a little bit of similarity, but I think these Benjamin's a much smoother vocalist and not quite as raspy.
He screams
Kai.
a bit, and when he screams, you can hear the comparison. But when he's singing in the upper register, I mean, Kai couldn't do that on his, in his dream.
Yeah, and there's even parts, and I'll mention them when we get to it. But I mean, there's parts where he reminded me of Matos. Like there was the guy is a pretty awesome singer, and I thought he fit this really well. And he's been one of the the long running members of this band who has been in the band from start to finish. So I enjoyed his vocal performance quite a bit on this, and I think this was a really nice kind of intro to that. And and just I'll finish up just by saying like the kind of kind of like church organ type of chords that you hear in the background, very Castlevania-esque, which makes sense considering the story being told. And this predates Twilight, both the books and the movies. So I wanted to check to see if they were trying to cash in on the vampire craze. It turns out they may have started.
Go figure. A classic in all respects. I could have easily made it my song of the week. I'm going to go in a different direction, but anybody would be well served to listen to this one. And then we get to Lust for Life, which ironically does not have much of a gamma ray feel to it, despite the similar name. It has a really kind of bombastic sound. I love the keys. I don't particularly love the riffs. I think they're a little vanilla, but at the same time, they're so damn catchy that it almost doesn't matter how simple they are. The band that they remind me of is Skylark. It reminds me of that like Italian metal scene, which is ironic because we recently spoke about Skylark on one of our Patreon episodes.
Yeah, not very glowing terms either.
But those first Skylark does have a few power metal albums that are quite good. They just have a DVD that's quite terrible, and I'll leave that for our Patreon fans. But this song is the soaring vocals during the pre-chorus and the chorus and the polish that they kind of put on this song, really, really, really good. And then you get to this solo section, which is just a blatant Stradivarius ripoff. But I love it. It's just a notch or two below Evil in my eyes, but it's a good song.
This is my song of the week. I just really, really enjoyed this song a lot. I love just how epic it kicks off. It's almost like this majestic sort of just the way that it kicks off, which is good because I feel like you said, the previous track had kind of a gamma ray vibe to it, and I feel like this song felt a little bit more unique and didn't really feel as much like at least from the get-go, like they were, tributing, another power metal band. But I just, man, I love the chorus is just so catchy. I think this is like everything that you could really want from a power metal song. And I kept listening to the album, like wondering if something else was going to take over as my favorite track. And it just never did. Like this was my favorite, and it stayed that way pretty much from the beginning of listening to the end. It's just shy of it's a little longer than 6 minutes, but it doesn't really outstay its welcome, much like the previous track, which is oddly enough, exactly the same length. But I like this one a lot. So let's give it a listen and we'll move along. I also didn't realize that the album was broken up into 3 chapters. So this is the third of the 4 tracks that comprise of chapter 1. So here is Lust for Life by Heavenly.
I just follow my way, ready to roam in the night. I hear the symphony, running after the devil, the prince of immortals. Feared by everyone, I am strong as hard as metal. Innocent blood and the stake on the crime is in my soul. Last fall, I don't belong to the sky, I just follow my way, ready to roam in the night. I hear the symphony, running after the devil, the prince of immortals. Free for everyone, I am blood as strong as metal. This is the flesh, I must demand. Lust for life.
Well, great choice with Lust for Life. I am not surprised that you chose it. I wasn't sure which you were going to choose. But certainly a worthy contender. And then we get to the third 6+ minute track in a row, Victory, Creature of the Night. This thing starts like a ballad with the piano, and it's very reminiscent of Angra, in my opinion. And then it eventually just goes up into a straight up power metal song with the double bass drums and the keys kind of leading the charge. It's rather heavy. It's like deceptively heavy for a band that I would classify as flower power metal. I have to say, I love how it changes pace throughout. It almost gave me like a Symphony of the Night vibe, which ironically, I guess, is what they were going for, considering the theme. And that was during the instrumental section. I have to think you like this one as well.
Yeah, Angra was the definitely the vibe I got, especially the beginning of the song actually reminded me of Andre Matos at the beginning of Inside by Avantasia. Just kind of like this very very like beautiful piano intro with the high pitched vocals over it that I think were reminiscent of Matos. But yeah, like you said, then it just kind of explodes into a more upbeat song. But then it kind of does like that, almost like Meatloaf-esque, like dun, 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 or more like, maybe Queen-like, runs like, and I think that kind of gives it a little bit more of a dramatic, theatrical kind of flair. Yeah, again, this is another really strong tune, and I think that it kind of gives the first chapter of the 3 chapters enough ammo to say this might be the strongest third of the album, all told. I feel like the album really starts off very strong, but I think that it just kind of, maybe if I had listened to it more like in these sections, it wouldn't feel like it kind of slogged on. But it did start to feel like it was getting a little bit long towards the end. But I mean, at the point we're at now in these first 4 tracks, like really outstanding stuff, just really awesome. Like I just really enjoyed this a lot. It's just, I just think that an album like this doesn't need to be 70 minutes
exactly
long.
I think that's well said. And then as we kick off part 2, they were, I think, smart to kind of go in a bit of a direction with 2 of the next 3 songs. We start with Illusion Part 1, and then it goes right into Illusion Part 2, The Call of the Wild, which is kind of an intro track to the second one. Again, you got these spooky sound effects with like a march-like slow build during the intro. And it's short, but I actually find it to be quite well done. It has like a very triumphant feel to it, like a return from victory or something like that. And then Call of the Wild shoots really fast out of the gate. And this one, this is like your standard power metal anthem in many respects. What band did it remind you of when you heard this one?
To me, this was more along the lines of Gamma Ray personally. I don't know if that was the same for
100%. I heard Gamma Ray through and through. I think that the bridge is critical on this track because it really kind of breaks up the monotony of the rest of the song, and it helps it remain catchy throughout. And it's, I think that it's a good start to part two, but I agree with you that towards the end of this, it gets a little long. I think that's well said, but this is a good Gamma Ray style power metal tune.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I can't put my finger on exactly which Gamma Ray song it reminded me of. Maybe it's a combination of songs, but yeah, it's kind of in that vein. And I don't say that in a bad way. Like, there's worse bands you could emulate on some of your tracks. So yeah, you can tell that they're definitely an influence.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then they go back into another short little interlude with The Ritual. This one has a really like out of space vibe to it. And I think that they do a nice job with the acoustic guitar sound. I think it's a nice touch that hadn't been explored to this point. And it kind of leads into Keepers of the Earth. What are your thoughts on these two?
Just kind of a pretty basic instrumental. I think just kind of breaks up the second chapter. Really like Keepers of the Earth though. Very very catchy power metal. I love those like super high pitched vocals that Benjamin does on this one that I couldn't even pray to be able to hit note wise. But this was another one. Has so the riffs were kind of gave me a little bit of a Blind Guardian kind of feel, just in case we're running out of great power metal bands that we could compare this album to. But I like this one a
hear
lot.
Something completely different on this track, but I'll preface it by saying it's my song of the week. I actually like this song a lot, and it was probably the biggest surprise of the week for me, so I named it my song of the week. Let's give it a listen, and then I'll kind of walk you through my rationale for it. This is Keepers of the Earth. After the intro, it really kind of goes in like a neoclassical direction, in my opinion. I hear Yngwie, I hear Galnerius, and then what really stood out to me was not that the verses were fantastic, but I love the vocal lines during the verses. I think that they are spectacular, and it leads to this pre-chorus, which rocks, and then it yields to this massive, big chorus that really is one that you kind of want to sing along to. It reminds me of, at least the chorus, it reminds me of Salvation by Helloween with a touch of Eagle Fly Free, and that's all I need to hear. So at least the way the chorus is constructed. So song of the week, really a fan of this one.
Yeah, I definitely noticed some of the, I mean, I know, there's two guitar players here. There was definitely some of that Helloween style, Wyke Kai, or Wyke Roland, or Wyke Sasha, depending on which era of Halloween we're talking. But definitely on some of these tracks, I definitely picked up on that. That was the part that reminded me of Halloween, was some of the guitar work. Whereas, like, I felt like the songs as they were constructed in certain times were quite Gamma Ray like some of the times. But yeah, this is a fine choice for song of the week. Might have honestly been one of my runners up or top of the list tracks, as well as the following track, Miracle, which is the longest album or longest song on the album, clocking in at just over 9 minutes. This reminded me of just like your just epic power metal tracks. Thinking like Theater of Salvation by Ed Guy or something of that nature. But here's the thing about this song, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree. But it sounds like the album could have ended with this song. Like, it's such an epic ending. It has like this end of album kind of feel to it. And the album would have like clocked in at like 45 minutes. It would have been a really tight album. And I think that the album would have ranked higher for me had it ended here. Not that the rest of the album is bad by any chance, but it's almost like a little bit bloated. I feel like I'm maybe nitpicking a little bit, but I don't know. I felt like this song just had that end of album feeling to it, just that really epic, choruses and that slow down towards the end, and it just felt like it was all coming together. It reminded me quite a bit of like the end of Theater of Salvation by Ed Guy. But no, there's still 4 more
and
tracks.
they're not short. I happen to agree with you. This track is a little bit long to be in this spot on the album and then follow it up with 4 more tunes. I think that the piano interludes and kind of the whimsical quality, the choruses are really good. I definitely hear Gamma Ray on this one as well. I don't really care so much for the bridge. It's a little bit too cheesy for me with the vocal choir and stuff like that. Not a bad song. It could have ended here, and I think I would have been totally pleased. I happen to agree with you, because then you get to Fight for Deliverance, and I'm not crazy about this one. I think the instrumental section is pretty cool. I think that the drum solo kind of kicks these things off, which is a nice touch. You don't really feature the drums so much up front on this album. But the issue is that it's nothing you haven't really heard when you get into the track proper. It's like you've heard this already, and there was kind of no need for it, I guess.
I thought the drum intro to this song was again came out of the Gamma Ray playbook. It reminded me of something from Somewhere Out in Space. I think there was like an interlude track before one of the songs towards the end of the album. I'm not going to remember off the top of my head, but just the way that the tone of the drums was, it reminded me of that. And yeah, this is it's still a very fine song. It's just shy of 7 minutes. Like, it's almost as if they released the 3rd chapter of this album as like an EP, like a couple of months after the album. And we're like, oh, here's what you missed from the Dust to Dust sessions. But they were just like, no, let's just, put it all on one album. And granted, it's a story, and these, like I'd mentioned earlier, like these segments of the album are separated into chapters. This is the beginning of chapter 3. I think I might have, had I realized that when I was listening to the album, I might have listened to it differently. But again, I think I'm being a little bit nitpicky. I just think that the first 9 tracks were so strong. It almost was like, maybe you want to, cut your losses at that point. And like, you have a winner here, sign of a winner.
I don't disagree. I think they get a little weird on the back end of the album. Hands of Darkness is an instrumental tune that's kind of buried on the back. I never really noticed it. I really made a concerted effort to give the back half of the album like the attention it deserves, even though it was long in the tooth for me. I definitely heard Symphony X in the intro, which I thought was interesting because I don't consider them power metal at all. They're prog in my eyes. And the reason I say that, it's really just the keyboards and the riffs and how they play off of each other. I didn't remember this song as much, but it definitely gives all the musicians a chance to shine.
I'm a big fan of just that, the guitar with the, married with that, that organ style, keyboard sound, like together, like definitely that neoclassical Symphony X. I'm definitely hearing that. It's odd that like there's this 5.5 minute, basically like instrumental guitar solo, more or less, kind of bringing up the rear on this one before there's another, 13 minutes of music that comprises of 2 tracks.
Kingdom Come
But
is
I think this was the only track that was written solely by Leclerc, and so which makes sense because it's mostly a guitar song. Just an interesting choice. But yeah, it's a weird placement for like a 5.5 minute, instrumental, like towards the end of the album. That's already kind of long to begin with. It's a good track. I just interesting placement.
And I think you could say the same thing about Kingdom Come. It's over 8 minutes. It's buried on the back of the album. I think it too has a Symphony X kind of feel to it, but it reminds me of something you'd hear on Twilight and Olympus, like vividly, like especially in the intro on this one. And then all of a sudden the verses kick in, and it's like this galloping, it has like a gallop to it with kind of catchy choruses. I'll give them that. It reminds me of Freedom Call. That's what I hear when I hear this song. It just could have been shorter. Like I don't think it needed to be 8+ minutes. I think that they could have cut this thing down and it would have resonated a little bit more. And then it ends with another meaty track with Dust to Dust. Just when you think it's over, they have almost a 5-minute song on the back end. What are your thoughts on these two as you kind of take the album out?
Again, like, I think they're good songs. I just really prefer the first like 2/3 of the album to this. I mean, maybe I wouldn't be bothered as much by the length of the album if it wasn't so top and middle heavy, I guess. It's like these songs are very good songs, but like the songs that preceded them were better. And so that's kind of, and again, it's like, 5.5 minute instrumental followed by an 8+ minute, track, and we're not even done yet. Like you said, there's still, an almost 5-minute finale. And this is another song that has definite last song vibes, but we've already done this.
Right. It starts off like a piano ballad.
And I would argue that, I'd argue that Miracle was a better track.
It starts off as like a piano ballad, and then it gets very power metal ballady or what have you. It's definitely an interesting end to the album, but I don't know. I mean, I know it's the story and whatnot, but you could have ended it with Virus and called it a day. And I want to be clear, these are good songs. It's just it was a bit of a slog as I kind of listened to this over and over this week. I think that the great songs on this album, and there are a lot of them, hold up very well. Some of these are just a little bit long in the tooth, I think was the phrase you used, and I would agree with that. I'm so curious on a scale of 1 to 10 what you gave this, because it sounds like we're attacking the album, but I want to be clear, it's a very good power metal album. Not perfect, far from perfect, but it's very good.
Yeah, agreed. Again, like I said, I feel like I'm being a little bit nitpicky here, and maybe if I had a better grasp on the other Heavenly albums, this album might have more of a place for me to put it in that pantheon of albums. But you know what, I called in a friend on this one because I thought maybe it would be helpful to have somebody who knows Heavenly better than I do provide his thoughts, and that person is our friend Johannes from Skyblazer, who had done a conversation with us in the past. And oddly enough, the day before we recorded this episode, he has been doing a thing on his personal Facebook page where he is basically placing every song by a band in tiers. And typically it would have to be a band that he knows well enough to rank every single song. He's done Power Quest, which is his his favorite band. I believe I asked him at one point to do Rainseed / Majestica, which he was happy to do. And just oddly enough, yesterday he made a list of his tier for every Heavenly song. I don't think anything was in below a C tier on their entire discography. I don't think. I'm just trying to remember that off the top of my head, because he has the S tier, the A tier, the B tier, and the C tier. So I just figured, what better person to ask? So I shot him a message, and he was a little bit busy tonight doing ABBA karaoke.
Aren't we all?
But yeah, but he decided to take a little rest from what he was doing, which I appreciate, to send these thoughts. He actually said, "Sacrificed my social life for 30 minutes plus, dude. You're welcome."
Wow.
So Johannes, we thank you for taking your the time out of singing Dancing Queen to provide your thoughts on this. So I'll read what he had to say. He said, "Dust to Dust is the third album by Heavenly, and ironically, it's also number 3 for me when ranking the albums, the Heavenly albums. Personally, I think Heavenly has only good albums under their belt. Even on the lesser good albums, they're great. This album has got a fantastic beginning and middle. Evil is an amazing song, which kicks off the album perfectly. After a couple of songs, we get Illusion Part 2, and after a brief interlude, we get Keepers of the Earth. The 3 songs I just mentioned are among Heavenly's best songs, which is why it's infuriating that several songs in this album are kind of mediocre. Victory, Hands of Darkness, and Kingdom Come do very little for me personally, and I don't really like the interludes on the album. Makes it feel disjointed. The final ballad, Dust to Dust, is pretty good, and Miracle as well as Fight for Deliverance are pretty memorable as well. Overall, the album is sort of a middle point for me with Heavenly. My favorite album by them is Virus, which is a lot heavier, but also has got way stronger choruses. Sign of the Winter comes second for its amazing keyboards and orchestrations, as well as its influences from Stradivarius and Gamma Ray. Dust to Dust falls in the middle because it's not doing the orchestral cheesy part as well as Sign, but neither the heavier parts as well as Virus. Nevertheless, it's still a great power metal album that everybody who loves the more melodic stuff should hear for themselves. So
Well said. And
never at a loss for words, our
Oh,
friend Johannes, but we do appreciate taking the time out of your social life to provide those thoughts. And I think he kind of summed it up probably better than I would have been able
and
to.
I think he echoed our sentiments
that's
in
why
many regards. I think that the songs that like we really kind of pointed out are some of the songs that he liked as well. So, there's a little bit of consensus there. Anyway, on a scale of 1 to 10, what are you ranking this thing?
To me, I thought this was a 7.875. Just shy of 8. Didn't quite make it to that 8, which is like very good to bordering on excellent for me. But that said, like, I really enjoyed every time I put this album on, and I liked it a little bit more each time that I listened to it. If the first time I listened to it, I couldn't believe how dense it was for a power metal album. But I really enjoyed it. I think I probably would rank it higher if I had nostalgia for it. But I just thought it was very good, and it hits all those notes that, as a power metal fan and a fan of melodic music in general, like Johannes mentioned, that it just pushes all the right buttons for me. I'm guessing you're in the same area.
I am. I think that if you would have asked me a year ago from memory, I think I would have said it's definitely an 8, maybe an 8.5. I mean, I think it is a very good disc. I think it's more now below an 8. I don't know that it has aged quite as well as some other albums from the era, but to say I didn't enjoy it would be a gross overstatement. It's a 7.75 for me, a very good power metal disc. For a band that's somewhat polarizing. I think they're hard bands, and then they have people that like to kind of give them a little bit of lip because of the vocals or because of the way they construct the songs. I don't know, but a bit polarizing, but two good scores across the board from both of us. No question about that.
Yeah, I think this is the closest we've come
to
a score since Dream Theater's Awake album, where we were also an eighth of a point apart. So yeah, this is a very very enjoyable listen, and I hope we go back and do more Heavenly albums. This probably was going to be something that I would have eventually asked you to do a career retrospective on, because they don't have a ton of albums, and they're just one of those bands I felt like I was, wish I knew more by. But this is definitely a good start, and I'm sure we will circle back to this band again in the future, and we'll definitely talk about them if they do in fact release a new album, which I think last year or the year before they had announced that they were getting back together. I hadn't even realized that they were apart, but it sounds like they are
after
active band again.
13-year hiatus, they are back. And that was also part of the reason I picked them, because I was excited to hear that they are back. I'm curious to hear what new music sounds like with the modern production methods and everything else. I think that it has all the potential in the world, although I don't know that the vocals are going to carry quite the way they did as they did 20 years ago, because we all get older. So nonetheless, I'm glad you liked it. A great band to kind of do a deeper dive into in the future. I agree with you. And that's that. I want to mention a pair of news items. The first is another band that is kind of celebrating an anniversary, and that's Sabaton, celebrating their 25th anniversary for the band. Apparently, they're going to do special things each month this year, dedicating each month to a different album in the discography, starting with Primo Vittoria, of course, and then going to the most recent album, The War to End All Wars. I am always intrigued by what they come up with, because I think that the band is just very good in terms of reflecting and playing homage to the old stuff and things like that. So I'm curious to see where this thing goes, but I can't believe it's been 25 years of Sabaton. That's nuts.
Yeah. I feel like I got into them. They were around for a good bit. I got into them around the time that Art of War was released. That was when they played at Prague Power, and that was kind of my introduction to them. And I was a little surprised at how much they had. I think 3 albums prior to that, at least 2. So I didn't realize that they were around. But yeah, 25 years. That's making me feel a little bit old. But I'm not in the band, so I guess I can't.
Well, yeah, but speaking of bands that have been around for a while, you mentioned earlier you are wearing a Pearl Jam shirt, and you had something you wanted to talk about. Hit me.
Yeah, well, it always warms my heart when I see Blabbermouth or Brave Words posting Pearl Jam news, even though it's typically considered, a heavy metal news site. It's nice that I guess Pearl Jam falls into the realm of hard rock enough that they can get a mention. And, as one of my favorite non-metal bands, along with Green Day, who, like I mentioned before, has an album coming out later this month, supposedly Pearl Jam is going to be writing a heavier album, their next album. I do not know if it's supposed to be released this year. I'm hoping that it is, because it has been a few years now since Gigaton came out in 2020. But honestly, I haven't really, really liked a Pearl Jam studio album since 2006's self-titled album, or the Avocado album, as is known amongst the fans. I know that they were kind of working out some of their anti-George W. Bush angst at that time, but I just felt like that album had a lot of balls on it that I feel like the albums that followed didn't really have. I thought Backspacer had its moments, but it was almost a little bit too mellow. I feel like they picked up a little bit with the following 2 albums, Lightning Bolt and Gigaton, but I probably would say Lightning Bolt's my favorite of those 3. But man, it's been a while since Pearl Jam released an album that really kicked my ass. I would say that 06 release was probably the last one for me. So I'm always going to be a big fan, and there's always a handful of tracks that I really like on all their albums, but I would like to see one of their albums make it onto my year-end list one of these years that we do this. And so far, they haven't released an album since we started doing these lists, so they're 0 for 0 so far. But I don't know that I would have put their last couple albums. I don't know if they would have made my list those years. So we'll see. Was that what you had heard or wanted to talk about, or is it something else that we can add to it?
No, you hit the nail on the head. The discussion about the songwriting process and the fact that it is very guitar driven, and it seems like there's a bit of angst as well, has me very intrigued. And I just would be remiss not to talk about that a little bit. I am not the fan you are, although I definitely enjoy the band and have all their albums and all that, but I'm waiting for an album that just blows me away. And here's hoping that this is it. There's certainly a lot of material to write about. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to it immensely.
Yeah, I think with Pearl Jam, it's become such a collaborative effort with the songwriting, with Jeff and Stone and Eddie and everybody else. I forgot to mention Mike McCready. I don't know how much Matt Cameron does with songwriting as the drummer, but I do believe that the songwriting is a collaborative effort, and I wonder if that's kind of why I don't know, it feels like they've been a little bit less heavy in the last few albums. And one of the comments I saw on, in reply to that article was that I guess Jeff and Stone are going to be doing more of the songwriting. So I don't know if that's, I'm not really like the way I am with Halloween, where I know who wrote what song. I'm not like that with Pearl Jam, where I know, oh, that's an Eddie Vedder song or that's a Stone Gossard song. I literally have no idea. So I'm interested. I always look forward to see what they come out with, but they definitely have slowed down their releases, as they've gotten older, which, is pretty typical of, bands that are kind of creeping into their 50s and 60s, a little less touring, a little more time in between albums. But yeah, I'm excited, and I know that we will definitely talk about that album when it does get released. Did you happen to notice if they had a timetable on it, or they just literally said the next album?
Yeah, they don't really commit, I think. So unclear whether it's going to be this year or next year. I don't think it would be pushed to 2026, but stranger things have happened. I would have to think that with the modern production and the fact that they already have a direction for the album, I would think it's going to be within the next year or two, the max.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the band has been known to like sprinkle, individual singles here and there, but I mean, I don't think they've released a new song since Gigaton was released. So it's been 3 years at least since we've heard anything from the band. So I am very much looking forward to seeing, what their next thing sounds like. It's very, very curious, and I will be ready to tear it apart or praise it or whatever I feel like it deserves. But definitely one of my favorite live bands to see. Just a really enjoyable experience. Just having no clue what songs they're going to play, which I think makes it really, really fun. Just having that, that feeling of just not knowing what to expect. And I think that's cool. I wish metal bands would take a page out of that book, but God knows a lot of like those songs are so complicated. They really need to be rehearsed. So yeah, glad that we both had that on our radar. I'm definitely looking forward to more from them, and I definitely will. I'm sure we'll both talk about Green Day's new release as well. I'm hoping again that that's another band that it's been a while since they've released an album that I've been really excited about. 21st Century Breakdown might have been the one for me, and that was in 2009. So both bands are kind of due for knocking my socks off after some what I would consider middling releases.
Very well said. It is going to be an interesting 2024. But next week we put a bow on 2023 when we do our album year in review episode. Always one of the highlights of my year, and I look forward to kind of going through it with you. I have no idea what your album of the year is, and needless to say, I'm very, very curious. I'm not sure you know what your album of the year is, and we're going to talk about it later this week. So we'll see what happens, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. I just want to give a shout out and a thank you to all of our Patreon members who help support the show. Give us a like and a follow on our social media pages. It does help others to find the show. And we'll come back next week and discuss all things 2023 before we forge ahead in 2024.
Yeah, I have some finalizing to do, but I will be ready, and I am excited. This is always one of my favorite things that we do from year to year. I kind of wish that we had been doing this longer, because it's. I always also look forward to going back and looking at some of the previous lists that we've put together in previous years. It's kind of a good way of reminding me of some of the better albums in recent years, because there's just so much to keep up with that sometimes you just forget, because it's impossible to remember it all.
Well said. Well said. Enjoy the week, my friend. I look forward to recapping with you soon, and we'll come back next week with the following week with a brand new album to discuss. So cheers, my friend. Have a great night.
You too, my friend.